It's been 5 years since Formula One raced in China, and today was the day for the Chinese Grand Prix. But did the race live up to the hype that we've all built up? Let's find out in today's race recap. What's going on, you guys? It is the American F1 fan, Eric Ringel here, and we are here for the Chinese Grand Prix race recap. Yes, Max Verstappen takes victory in China and basically almost had the perfect weekend except for the sprint race qualifying. He wins the sprint race. He wins the feature race, we'll call it, for the Chinese Grand Prix. But was it as straightforward? Let's find out. So lap one, Max Verstappen gets an amazing getaway, gets away from Fernando Alonso, from Sergio Perez, and Fernando there for a little bit of time was actually in second place, but eventually fell back as he was trying to hold up Sergio Perez. He then fell into the clutches of Lando Norris. The first part of the race, I would say, was pretty straightforward, and I think most F1 fans were, basically felt like that this race was over after, lap 1 and 2, where Max Verstappen was able to get such a huge lead. And for the first part of the race, I think most Formula One fans went, this is going to be another one of those boring ones. The Chinese Grand Prix is just not going to live up to it. But I think everything kind of turned on its head about halfway through when the Sauber kick of Valtteri Bottas retires, has the engine let go, and I think this is the first of many questionable decisions by the F1 stewards. They just had the yellow flags waving in that particular section and waited for quite a bit of time before they brought out the virtual safety car, and it almost ended up screwing, the likes of Lando Norris, where he had just, passed the pit lane entry. When the VSC had come out, Charles Leclerc was able to take advantage of that and pit, and it almost sounded like for a bit there that, it was really going to, put out Lando Norris. Max and Sergio were able to make pit stops, did a fantastic double pit stop there. Max gets out, Sergio Perez comes in, and I mean, it was a work of art to see the double pit stop by Red Bull, but we thought for a little bit that Lando may get put out by this, but the virtual safety car stays out for, quite a bit of time. Lando eventually is able to pit under the VSC, but then all of a sudden we get the full safety car, and now it allows everybody to, to pit for new tires. We saw a lot of varying strategies here. We saw Fernando Alonso go to the soft tires, and we thought there for a little bit of time, that maybe there's a chance he could go to the end, maybe there's not, but then we knew he was going to have to make a pit stop. And then, under the safety car, we're getting ready for the restart, and I'm going to make a separate video about Lance Stroll, but what the hell was he doing? Lance Stroll just absolutely brain farts and just stops paying attention for no reason, and just before the safety car, the restart, he slams into the back of Daniel Ricciardo, who then in turn kind of slams into the back of Oscar Piastri, and just, like I said, there's no other word for it than brain farting. And then we get the restart, and then we have Yuki Tsunoda, who unfortunately gets taken out by Kevin Magnussen, and we'll talk about those penalties here in just a moment. But I don't know what Lance was doing. So now getting into the penalties here, we've got several penalties coming up. The first one was Logan Sargent getting a 10-second penalty for, I guess, maybe speeding under the safety car, and this is where the stewards kind of need more clarification as to why they gave the penalty that they did. And I know we get the race notes, at the end, but this one was a little bit more confusing, I think, to, normal Formula One fans and even, fans that are, just rabid, we were all trying to figure out why Logan Sargent got a 10-second penalty here when, it seems to me that he was able to just barely get ahead of Nico Hülkenberg under that first safety car. And again, like I said, I don't know where this penalty was coming from. I feel like Logan Sargent did what he was supposed to do and, just sped up enough that he was able to get ahead of Nico Hülkenberg. But unfortunately, Logan gets a 10-second penalty here, which I think really kind of, brought a damper into his spirits. He was having a really good race, staying up with Alex Albon for a good portion of this race. And I think this truly kind of, put a damper on the rest of his race. Then you get Kevin Magnussen, who get a 10-second penalty for taking out Yuki Tsunoda. And I don't call it taking it out or taking him out. I think this is just one of those, if you watch the replays, I felt like Yuki Tsunoda got a little wide in this corner. And, Kevin got a little bit, next to him with his front tires to Yuki's back tires. And I truly felt like Yuki kind of slid a little bit here and unfortunately kind of slid into the path of Kevin Magnussen. And it cost Yuki his race as he, develops a puncture, breaks the rim. You could see it, the rim was all bent. And Kevin Magnussen then gets a 10-second penalty for this. So then Lance Stroll, who brain farts for whatever reason, slams into the back of Daniel Ricciardo, also gets a 10-second penalty. And I don't understand how the F1 stewards think that all those three incidents, or at least the two incidents between Kevin Magnussen and Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, and Oscar Piastri, how those two basically equal to 10-second penalties. If you're going to penalize Kevin for his contact and give him 10 seconds for that one's a little bit more of a racing incident. I can see it both ways. But Lance Stroll getting 10 seconds for slamming into the back of Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri, ruining Daniel Ricciardo's race where he ends up having to retire, Oscar Piastri having to run a car that's literally lost a lot of its downforce because the back end of his car is ruined. I don't understand how Lance Stroll doesn't get at least a stop-and-go penalty or maybe even a 20-second penalty here. Like, the stewards make no sense with this decision. They basically equate both those incidents as exactly the same. So, obviously, with those two incidents, it brings out another safety car as they're having to get Yuki Tsunoda's car off the track. Kevin's trying to get back to the pits to make another pit stop to get rid of the tires that he had that basically got sliced in half. So we get a second safety car restart. Again, Max gets a really good start here, but we saw really good fights through the midfield as we saw we saw Nico Hülkenberg up in ninth, fighting Lewis Hamilton. Really good fight there. Eventually Lewis Hamilton was able to get past, but he just wasn't able to make enough inroads to get up to Oscar Piastri. But I think the second half of the midfield, from about 11th on down, we saw some really good fights here. From like Esteban Ocon down, we were seeing really good fights between Esteban Ocon, Alexander Albon, Logan Sargent, Kevin Magnussen, Guan Yu Zhou. Like, everybody was having really good fights, and it really made you feel like that these positions really, truly mattered. And it was really good to see the fights in the lower half of the midfield trying to get up to that 10th place. And that was where I think a lot of the excitement was in that second half of the midfield, just all the fights, trying to fight to see who could potentially get to that last points paying position. That was, I think, the most exciting part of the race, is seeing all the passing that was happening there, the fighting. That's where the excitement had. But Max Verstappen, even after that second safety car restart, just really put, pressure on Lando Norris, his teammate Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc was able to just, pull away, lap after lap after lap, and eventually he gets to 13-second lead with his victory over Lando Norris, who finishes second, which was a great finish for Lando Norris. Sergio Perez, there's still some questions there as to why he wasn't able to, really bring the fight to Lando Norris with a much more, well-rounded car than Lando Norris, as we've learned over the last few weeks. The McLaren is, not as well-rounded as the Red Bulls are, but we see Sergio Perez finishing behind Lando Norris. So now let's get into the full race rundown of the entire field. We had Max Verstappen obviously taking victory, 13 seconds over Lando Norris. Then we had another 6 seconds behind Lando Norris, Sergio Perez finishing in third, completing the podium. And we thought for a time Charles Leclerc may be able to catch up to Sergio Perez, but that just wasn't the case, as Charles Leclerc finishes fourth, Carlos Sainz finishes fifth, and I think we kind of saw a little bit of the pit stop strategies, falling in Charles Leclerc's favor over Carlos Sainz, as they didn't take another opportunity under those safety cars to maybe pit Carlos Sainz, to put him on a newer set of tires. And, Carlos was just not able to keep up with Charles Leclerc, towards the end of the race. But then you had George Russell finishing in sixth. George Russell was just kind of by himself all day today. The Mercedes of George Russell was kind of quiet all day, just, kind of plodding along, just doing what he needed to do to really bring in some good points for Mercedes. But then moving down, Fernando Alonso, after making a late pit stop with about 15 laps to go, moved on to the medium compound tires, dropped out of the top 10, but made quite the fight back, as he was able to fight back through the field and able to finish seventh. And this really has to make Aston Martin feel good about the direction of their car and where it's going. For him to be able to fight through the field the way he did and at least get back to seventh place. But I think it's a tale of what if they would have, potentially had a different strategy for Fernando Alonso. So then you had Oscar Piastri again. They had damage to the back end of his car, finishing in eighth. Lewis Hamilton, what a fight back for Lewis. After qualifying 18th, had the right strategy calls all throughout, the couple safety cars, was able to fight his way back to ninth. And you could tell, though, he was struggling towards the end. And I really felt like he should have been able to catch up Oscar Piastri in the damaged McLaren and should have been able to pass him, but he didn't. And then finishing out the points, Nico Hülkenberg, giving Haas another point on the season and getting him a little bit closer to the Visa Cash App Red Bull team, was able to, basically kind of stay with Lewis Hamilton and really fought him for a little bit of time. And I don't know if that's more of a damning nature of what Mercedes has on the track, the fact that he wasn't really able to pull away from the Haas like he should have been able to, or is it just, the Haas is making the right moves? They brought their first major update this weekend, and, we're starting to see the Haas improve more and more. Then looking at the bottom half of the field, you had Esteban Ocon finish just outside of the points in 11th place. You had Pierre finish in 13th, but I wonder how much of an outlier this really is. We know that Alpine hasn't, made the improvements to the car to really, push them up to the field like they were today. I'm interested to see what they're able to do in Miami, but I think this was more of just a one-off for Alpine more than it is that they've improved their car this much. Alexander Albon, is in the middle of them, finishing in 12th position. Really good race from Alex. Very quiet race for him. He really didn't, put a step the wrong way. Was able to just, plod along and do what he needed to do to, really bring a Williams car that has had a lot of, controversy and a lot of talk around it. He was able to have a good finishing position for Williams to, put them in the best of the rest as far as the teams that haven't scored points yet this season. So then you had the hometown hero himself, Guan Yu Zhou, finishing 14th. It was a tale again of what ifs. They pitted him, again like they did, like Aston Martin did with Fernando Alonso, trying to hope that if they put him on the soft compounded tires, maybe he could work himself back up. Potentially fight for points against Nico Hülkenberg. Just wasn't able to do that and kind of got stuck, fighting in this midfield between Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, Logan Sargeant. Had a lot of fights between those guys towards the end and just wasn't able to capitalize on the soft compounded tires at the end. Then you had Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, and then Logan Sargeant as the last of the finishers in this race. So now looking at the driver standings, Max Verstappen on 110 points has a 25-point lead over Sergio Perez. This is exactly, I think, what Red Bull wanted. I think most fans realize that, Max Verstappen is the lead driver there. They're gonna, he's going to get the voice in how their updates go and all that. And Max Verstappen is just head and shoulders above everybody else in this field right now. Charles Leclerc in third place in the driver's standings. Another 9 points behind Sergio Perez, and they're going to have to start making a move at Ferrari, to potentially fight for second place. I just don't think anybody's got a shot at catching Max Verstappen unless, Ferrari makes this huge update that brings them level with Red Bull. But then you have Lando Norris in fifth place, Oscar Piastri in sixth, so you have Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, which obviously that's the way the Constructors is going to look. But then in seventh, you have George Russell. Fernando Alonso is right behind George Russell. That'll be a really good fight there, as there's 2 points between those guys. Lewis Hamilton, another 12 points behind Fernando Alonso. Lewis has got to start making a move here, as, Mercedes, yes, they don't have the car to really bring the fight to, the Red Bulls, but they're going to need to start making moves here soon to be able to bring the fight to McLaren and to Ferrari. And then rounding out that top 10, you have Lance Stroll, who's on 9 points, just far off the pace. And, really, and I'll make another video about Lance himself, but you have to start to really question, Lance's positioning in the team, as he's just not, doing what, you would expect him to do at a team that's, teetering on fifth place, fourth place, potentially fighting, for, the spots behind Red Bull. Then just outside of the top 10 in the points, you have Yuki Tsunoda in 11th. Bad race for Yuki today, no fault of his own there. You have Oliver Behrman, who's still in the, still in 12th place in the points. After he filled in for Carlos Sainz. You have Nico Hülkenberg and then Kevin Magnussen as the last of the people that have points in the driver standings. It's really helping that Haas is scoring points here early on, when we all thought that Haas was going to be that last place team. Then moving over to the constructor standings, as you can see on the screen here, Red Bull absolutely starting to run away with the Constructors Championship. They're 44 points ahead of Ferrari so far this season, with a lot of the 1-2s that Red Bull have been able to put on early in the season. This is really helping them to start, building a gap to the rest of the field. Red Bull on 195 points, Ferrari on 151, and then McLaren Mercedes, who's 59 points behind Ferrari. If they start to bring the updates that, really improve this car and start bringing the fight to Ferrari, we're going to see a really good fight coming in for the second and third place positions. But then you have Mercedes and Aston Martin, in fourth and fifth position, and we're going to see a really good fight there, with Mercedes on 52, Aston Martin on 40. That should be a really good fight for the fourth and fifth place positions. Then you have the Visa Cash App Red Bull team, who's on 7 points. Haas is on 5 points, gaining another point today on the Visa Cash App Red Bull team. They're just 2 points now behind that sixth spot. So when we look at everything that happened today at the Chinese Grand Prix, I would say that out of 5, if I were to rate this race from 1 to 5, I would say this was a 3. You know, at the beginning, we thought that there was this, race was going to run away, Max Verstappen victory, and we just weren't going to get the excitement. But, fortunately, when we get, fortunately for us as fans, but unfortunately for Kick Sauber, when we get safety cars like we did today, it really kind of, brings back the excitement as it brings back in strategy, and we get a lot more fights in the midfield when, the cars get bunched back together. And we saw some excitement there in the midfield, and I truly think that this was probably right around average to just above average of a race. But guys, let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think on a scale of 1 to 5 of the Chinese Grand Prix and the Chinese Grand Prix race weekend. I mean, I think China, really brought some, really great racing this weekend between the sprint race and the actual Grand Prix itself. But let me know in the comment section down below what you guys thought of the Chinese Grand Prix, guys. Please slap a like on this video. It helps this video get out to more and more Formula One fans. And if you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button for more Formula One content. I will be back to live streaming races. I've taken the last couple weeks off between being sick and having late races to where, it's impossible to do live streams. We will be back for the Miami Grand Prix, but subscribe to my channel so you guys can catch those race reactions. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. And guys, for the American F1 fan, I'm Eric Ringgold, signing off.